Next, I'm excited to introduce Meeta Dash, VP of Product at Verta. Meeta is a customer-centered product leader with a track record of launching innovative products that solve real business problems. At Verta, she's building our MLOps platform to help data science teams track, deploy, operate, and monitor models, thus bringing order to AI/ML chaos. Today, she is here to share her wisdom on how product managers can help steer the ship in the right direction and increase success of AI initiatives. Take it away, Meeta.
Hi, welcome everyone. So today we are talking about AI products and what's involved in moving from research to production. And the focus will be around how we align people, process, and tools. And I'll be sharing some of my learnings launching AI products as a product manager, what has worked and things that didn't work. And in the past, I have launched chatbots and I built a voice AI platform at Cisco. In the recent years, I have also built data annotation products where we were optimizing basically data labeling and data annotations with machine learning automation. And most recently at Verta, we are creating a MLOps platform. And we are working with customer teams launching valuable AI products to market. So I'll be sharing some of my learnings in the process. So what I have seen is successful AI projects have few things in common. First of all, there is a business focus when we are approaching to AI technologies. Second, having the right team structure and alignment is extremely important. Third, adoption of agile practices that is optimized for AI. Tools and automations are baked in the process versus being an afterthought. And finally, how product teams iterate faster and manage risks on an ongoing basis plays a big role. And in most of my experience, AI services we built were deeply embedded into software systems. However, they significantly differ from software projects, and I'll tell you why. Now, these are some of the key differences that I have seen. AI projects are very research oriented, a lot of experimentation, testing, validation, and those things continue throughout the project. And if you are coming from a software world, for example, if you are a product manager or a program manager, who used to build software products, you suddenly need to work with a very different set of team members with widely different skill sets. You may be dealing with data engineers, you may be working with data scientists, researchers to ML engineers. And also there is a lot of focus on data and data infrastructure. So tools are also widely different. And then, since AI projects are very much research oriented and very ad hoc, measuring velocity and ROI gets even more difficult. The way AI and ML systems are tested and monitored are also very different than software. And on top of that, AI projects introduce new challenges. For example, explainability, bias, model interpretability, and those are new things and concepts that you have not seen in software world. So how should we approach AI projects? Let's walk through a 7-step process. And I'm sharing this based on my experience in the past. Before we do that, let's look at some real world examples. A couple of months back, Walmart fired in-store robots. These robots scan inventories and help find out of stock products. What they found is a simpler and more cost effective solution: human employees who could also replace the out of shelf products and add them to the shelf, which was the ultimate goal. And the AI product was not doing everything end to end. So, an example of a cool AI solution not giving expected ROI. Another example is how IBM Watson healthcare initiative slowed down. It was overhyped and it couldn't meet the expectations, especially in cancer care. One statement made by a healthcare partner, which I found very intriguing, is the thing that Watson never did was say very clearly that this is the problem that we are going to solve. And in healthcare space, we needed technology solutions that works and are more practical. So this is an example where the problem space was too broad, in my view, and not really well defined, and the solution was not feasible for the problem. And then we see examples like Genderify, an AI powered gender identification solution. And those things fail because they are built for a problem that doesn't exist. So the first rule is to start with the business problem or user need and not technology or data. And I was reading an article and it mentioned something that is interesting is starting with your data or an AI technology is like packing your bag before deciding your destination. So you would pack very differently if you're going for a skiing vacation versus a beach vacation. So before you start your AI initiative, ask these questions. What problems are we solving? What is the goal? Because having a very precise and measurable goal is very important. And not all problems can be solved by AI. So is AI really adding value or can it be done differently? Then why? Because why bother building a full-fledged conversational bot if your problem can be solved with a simple rule-based approach? And I had encountered this question when I was building a chatbot, and we made some conscious decisions when to go with rule-based bot versus a conversational AI. And the next question is, do you have access to data? And what is involved in getting the right data? And then also, what are the risks and constraints that you should consider? Example, is the infrastructure there? Is the data there? Do you need to hire the right talent? Possibility of privacy concerns. So these things also need to be considered. And last but not the least, how to measure success so you can make decisions on the future steps. And before you begin your AI projects, again, focus on these four criteria. Define the business value, set up measurable goals, evaluate data feasibility and technology feasibility. And once you have answers to these questions, you can move on. The next step is the team. And too often ML projects get kicked off by simply hiring data scientists or machine learning expertise. But in reality, this approach creates a lot of issues when things are productized. Now, if you look at the goal of a ML project, what are they, right? You need someone who defines business needs, procures budget, you need to create usable data, build the right algorithm, you need quality control and accuracy, and then spin up a performant and scalable service along with the supporting infrastructure so you can ship to production. And there is your cross-functional team. Depending on the size of the company, one person may wear multiple hats, but at least you need these roles. If you look particularly at data science teams, having the right balance of data scientists, ML engineers, MLOps, and other engineers is extremely crucial. UX design is another role that is sometimes ignored, but it's very important because it's not always about the best algorithm, but how users interact with the feature. And in my experience, I've seen designers with human computer interaction, HCI skills, really excel for some of the AI projects. And typically, product managers can create urgency around the need to build and align these cross functional teams. Next focus. The next focus should be around incorporating agile practices. Now, what is agile? Agile is based on four principles. The first one is individuals and interactions, having a working software, customer collaboration, and responding to change over following a very strict plan. And with these principles in mind, can Agile really apply to AI projects? AI projects are extremely uncertain. You have to evaluate the viability of technology choices continuously. You need iterations and rapid feedback loop. And the agile mindset really emphasizes on outcomes, which makes it a great fit for AI. So it's really important that you have to make sure that the AI applications work with agile practices. The question is, can we make it work for all the AI projects, and what can we do differently? The problem is we cannot apply agile methodologies like the way we do for software in AI projects. For starters, data scientists do not like daily stand-ups, especially during implementation phase. It's not just valuable for them. They do not have that frequent updates. It's difficult to time box experimental data projects in a sprint Scrum structure. Estimating data science work within a sprint is also complex. User stories, acceptance criteria that we are so used to in the software world are done a little differently for data projects. And there's a lot of unpredictability if we stick to time box sprint planning and end of sprint demos for AI projects, because sometimes the research work moves faster, sometimes it's much slower. So you need to adapt accordingly. So one thing that is for sure that we need to adapt agile process a little bit, but agile works for AI. So what we've tried in the past is we've tried different approaches. One approach that had worked for us is splitting model experimentation and model release into two different segments. Model experimentation is more spike based and sprints with a bit unpredictable outcomes. We were more successful with a less rigid Scrum practice, and even we have tried Kanban that worked extremely well for us. And when the model is closer to release, we spin up a formal Scrum with additional stakeholders because during the model release phase, we require integrations with the consuming teams. We need to optimize the model for the last mile. We need to do release planning. So a typical Scrum structure really worked well. So having R&D and production having slightly different processes really worked for us. But the bottom line is Agile works for AI, but depending on the company and the organization and the type of AI projects, you need to tweak it a little bit. And you cannot just take the software Agile methodology and just blindly apply it to AI. The fourth step is how do you scope the project? Now, your goal should be to put the product as fast as possible in the hands of the user. So, focus on efforts on the things that give the most value to the user. And this will also help you minimize the risk of putting a lot of efforts in building the wrong model or optimize the wrong metrics. So, the mantra here is keep it simple. Keep it simple when you are selecting an algorithm, when you're making decisions on whether I should go with heuristic versus classical ML or deep learning. And as you're deciding between real time, near real time, or batch projects, or even performance, availability, and other constraints. So, again, solving problems with the simplest model possible is always preferable. The reason being, you'll move faster, you'll build models that are interpretable, you'll build models that can work on multiple frameworks and platforms. So you can try different versions, and you'll also end up incurring less technical debt and make your model more interoperable with different services. The fifth step is how do you measure success? Now, measuring success for AI projects as you iterate on is critical because of the feedback cycle that you're looking for. So the best practices are decide on success criteria that are easily measurable and not really confusing. And you should always start with the product or feature goal that you had started your initiative on. For example, if increasing revenue for an e-commerce site is your goal, click-through rate of recommendation. So these are your business KPIs, and you have to keep track of business KPIs along with model output metrics. But also keep track of model performance metrics. Data and model freshness is also important, and bias and explainability is equally important as well. And the usual service health metrics, keeping the model service up and running is very important. But another aspect that you do not see typically in software, but you should consider in AI project is continue to do model validation. Unlike software releases, where product managers can define a very specific set of acceptance criteria, QA team validates them, and you release to production with really high confidence. But AI projects are released with too many unknowns. So some of the model validation process that you should adopt are how do you create ground truth? Either you use human in the loop or create an easier path for some use cases where you can create ground truth proxies. For example, if there is a recommendation, how many likes the users are giving or the click-throughs, and use these ground truth proxies to validate your model. Also, investing on A/B testing infrastructure pays off. For example, champion challenger testing is a great tool that is widely used nowadays. On top of that, continue to collect qualitative and quantitative feedback. These things should not be ignored at all. So continue to do model validation along with tracking other performance related metrics. The sixth step in the process is how do you work iteratively? Because iteration is critical for you, and tools and having repeatable standards is really important to increase that agility. You may have to make build versus buy decisions, and typically a product manager or a program manager helps facilitate these conversations. But the bottom line is you have to pick tools and automations, and those should be done throughout the ML lifecycle, from data preparation to model training, then deployment, model management, and monitoring. And for all those areas, you need to pick the right tools and make sure that that these tools are talking seamlessly with each other so you can add more automations. And in the process, decisions like whether to stitch together tools or versus choosing a platform, you need to make that choice. Whether you are using open source or proprietary technology, these are all again critical decisions, and based on your company strategy, your team, and the product that you're building, you may choose one path or the other, but make sure that those decisions are made sooner rather than tools and automation as an afterthought. Finally, the thing we need to constantly remind ourselves is AI is not a magic bullet. It doesn't solve everything. And again, we read such examples every day. For example, if you look at the COVID research work that has happened in the past 2 years, medical teams, for example, assessed hundreds of predictive tools developed last year for COVID, but none of them were found to be fit for a clinical use. Then there are similar examples in chatbots and conversational AI space as well, where enterprise companies, they had really high expectations from bots, and the bots really failed to deliver. But in reality, if you look at the timeline of, for example, the popular voice assistants, it took years for them to improve these assistants. So it's a long journey, and if you are taking on a very complex AI initiative, it takes years to meet the level of expectations that you have in the beginning. But then the other aspect is like how Andrew Ng put it out there, that AI doesn't have to be too complicated or expensive for your business. So it all boils down to setting the right expectations and also choosing a very high return investment. We do not need to boil the ocean or go for a very complex initiative in the get-go, but really choose the right initiative that can be simple, achievable, and can give you a lot of business ROI. So really setting the right expectations is important. But in reality, what we have seen is when companies make investments in AI, the expectations are generally very high. So it's up to the team and the product managers and the program managers to make sure that you keep everyone grounded in reality. There is a dream for AI, which is great, but what are we exactly set for achieving and what is the reality is extremely critical. So align your leadership with reasonable expectations, because sometimes it can take months to even access and clean the data to and even months to optimize your AI algorithm. And in some cases, there will be changes to your core business structure. Some of the things need to be completely overhauled. You may need to change your data and IT infrastructure. You may have to search for new talent and build a team from scratch. So these are very complex endeavors. And in every step, you will have new surprises and you need to course correct. So product managers, tech leaders, you should communicate realistic expectations with leadership. And again, not just with leadership, but also with your consumers, your customers, your end users. So they are, when they're interacting with your product, they know what to expect, and then you should have the right fallback options if AI doesn't work. And again, another thing that I have seen is nowadays many companies are moving towards more of an AI center of excellence, where models and AI services are built once by the platform team and they're consumed by other business units. And in my experience, I was building a similar voice AI platform and have experienced this firsthand, because it's a very complicated endeavor as well. And in those scenarios, it's very important that you negotiate success criteria with your business units and manage SLAs effectively, or else these platform projects can get unnecessarily complicated. So again, the key takeaway here is, for successful AI projects, first of all, focus on business needs and make sure that you are evaluating the constraints and making sure that AI is technically feasible to solve these business challenges. Second, build cross-functional teams and agile practices that is palatable for AI. Third, keep the scope simple and achievable. And fourth, iterate faster. Tools and automations really help you increase the agility and help you move quickly. But above all, set realistic expectations. Thank you.